ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. All praise is due to Allah. We seek His help and forgiveness. We seek refuge in Allah from the malice of our souls and the evil of our actions. Whomsoever accepts Allah's guidance will never be misguided, and whomsoever rejects Allah's guidance will never find guidance. I bear witness that there is no deity other than Allah, alone without any partners, and I bear witness that Muhammad is His servant and messenger. Alayhi salam. Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is your brother in Islam, Hazem Bata, from the Islamic Society of North America, ISNA. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to be here today, delivering the khutbah. Please know that if I say anything true or beneficial, that it comes from Allah. For all truth and benefit come from Him. And if I say anything false or detrimental, then know that it comes from me, for I am human and I am prone to error. Prone to a lot of error according to my wife, but that's another khutbah. So I was learning about the Sahaba and how many of the Sahaba came to Islam. And one particular Sahaba, I thought the story was pretty incredible. But there was something that I took from this story that stood out to me, that I don't think is what the author intended. I'll tell you about it a little later. First of all, I want to summarize what I have learned. And while I'm summarizing it, think about the lessons that you can draw from it. And then I'll tell you the twist, the thing that was different that I took from it. During the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was a tribe, Banu Hanifa. Banu Hanifa lived in Al-Yamama. And Al-Yamama is basically central Arabia. Banu Hanifa had a long-standing feud with Quraysh, the tribe of Mecca, the tribe of the Prophet ﷺ. They hated Quraysh. And in fact, Banu Hanifa, the tribe would say that the liar from Banu Hanifa is better than the trustworthy one from Quraysh. That's how much they looked down at the people of Mecca. And in fact, at one point, Banu Hanifa had captured some of the Sahaba and they executed them. That's how serious and that's how deep this hatred was. This was a very serious thing. Banu Hanifa was actively trying to kill the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and they were actively opposing Islam. One, because they were from Quraysh, which they hated, but two, because they brought about a message that was against their pagan belief system. So they had two reasons to hate the Muslims and the Prophet ﷺ. The chief of Banu Hanifa, the tribe that was giving the Muslims and the Quraysh a hard time, was Thumama ibn Athad. Thumama ibn Athad. He was the chief, he was a very smart man, and he was very, very wealthy. So one day, Thumama was on the outskirts of Medina. This was after the Muslims had migrated from Mecca to Medina. So some of the companions noticed Thumama, and they captured him, and they took him back to the Prophet ﷺ in the masjid. The Prophet ﷺ ordered them, tie him up to one of the pillars. It was basically a tree in the masjid. And he said, leave Thumama in the masjid. So that's what they did. And Thumama was there. He was not abused, right? He was not beaten up. He was not waterboarded, anything like that. He was just tied to one of the trees, and he was actually fed and given water, and he was observing the Muslims in their prayer, how they interacted, how they prayed, how they came and went, and so on. So a little later, the Prophet ﷺ came to Thumama, and he asked, "Ma laka ya Thumama? What's with you, Thumama? What's your problem, Thumama?" He was expecting something from Thumama. The Prophet ﷺ had an intuition about people, whether they truly hated Islam, whether they believed, but maybe just deep down they needed a little bit of coaxing, right? He had intuition for these things. So he asked them, "What's with you, Thumama?" And Thumama responded with arrogance. Thumama said, "If you kill me, my people will avenge you. If you pardon me, then you will pardon a grateful man. and if you kill me, and if you and if you ask for money for ransom, then you will be given it. He responded very arrogantly. So this wasn't the response that the Prophet ﷺ was looking for. So he left Thumama. Thumama again was left in the masjid. He was not abused. He was taken care of, and he was observing the Muslims in their conduct. Prophet ﷺ returned to Thumama the next day and asked him the same question. Ma laka ya Thumama? What's with you, Thumama? He's expecting a different answer. He has an intuition about Thumama. Thumama gives the same arrogant response. If you kill me, my people will avenge me. If you pardon me, then you will pardon a grateful man. And if you ask for ransom, for money, then you will be given it. Again, this was not the response that the Prophet ﷺ expected. So he left them another day, and he came back the third day. He asked him the same question, and he got the same arrogant response. So what do you think he did to him at this point? This was a man that had killed many of the Sahaba. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Atruku Thumama, release Thumama, let him go." The companions were surprised. Why are we letting this man go? He's killed some of our companions. It would be just for us to execute him. The Prophet was merciful. Some of the companions said, at the very least, ransom him. Most of the Sahaba were poor. Right? The Muslims were not well off financially at this point. They said, ransom him. He's extraordinarily wealthy. He could make us all rich. They needed the money. The Prophet ﷺ said, no, let him go. That's what they did. So they untied Thumama and they released him, and he left the masjid. So what did Thumama do? He went to a nearby well or garden. He made ghusl. He basically took a bath, took a shower. And he returned to the masjid. And he sought out the Prophet. And he said, "Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah." Subhanallah. He said, I didn't want to accept Islam when I was captive because people would say that I only converted because I was being held prisoner. And I didn't want anyone to think that. I wanted people to know that my conversion was sincere. This is what the Prophet ﷺ was expecting. He has an intuition about these kinds of things. And he said to the Prophet ﷺ, by Allah, there was no face on earth more hateful to me than your face. But now your face has become the dearest of all faces. By Allah, there was no religion more hateful to me than your religion, but now your religion has become the dearest of all religions. And by Allah, there was no city more hateful to me than your city, referring to Medina, Yathrib. But now your city has become the dearest of all cities to me. SubhanAllah. So, when Thumama was captured, he was actually on his way to Mecca. He was going to make Umrah. The pagans had their own way of making Umrah. And so now, subhanAllah, now he's a humble man. He asks the Prophet ﷺ, do you give me permission to complete my Umrah? And the Prophet said, yes, I do. And he taught him the Islamic way of making Umrah. So Thumama continues on to Mecca. He shows up to the Kaaba. He starts walking around the Kaaba and he starts chanting, Labbaik Allahumma Labbaik. Right? He starts making Umrah the Islamic way. And the pagans noticed this because the pagans didn't pray directly to Allah. They prayed to lesser gods. So when they heard him praying to Allah, here I am, O Allah, they knew that he had accepted Islam. So what did they do? They jumped him. They piled up on him and they beat him up. They started hitting him. Who saw this happening? Abu Sufyan, the chief of Mecca, the chief of the Quraysh. The person who was giving the Prophet ﷺ the biggest headache. Abu Sufyan noticed this and he comes running out, screaming, Atruku, leave him. Hada Malik al-Yamama. This is the king of al-Yamama. This is the chief of al-Yamama. He knew who he was and he knew the power that this man had. Al-Yamama basically was the entire central Arabia. And if you wanted to get to Mecca or to Medina, you had to pass through his territory. You had to pass through Al-Yamama. This is not somebody you want to beat up. So Thumama gets up and he says, I swear by Allah, I will not any supplies from the surrounding lands reach you. He was going to boycott the Quraysh, boycott Mecca. And that's not good for Mecca, because Mecca has two things. Mecca has the Kaaba and the Zamzam well of water. That's pretty much it. Mecca has almost zero agricultural land. It has few palm trees, right? It's a very difficult climate in which to live. And wallahi, if the Kaaba was not there, nobody would live there. So they imported much of their food. So when he boycotted them, they felt it hurt. It hurt. So what did the Quraysh do? They reached out to the Prophet ﷺ and they said, can you please ask Thumama to lift the boycott? We're struggling. Look at what happened. Why did the Muslims migrate from Mecca to Medina in the first place? It was because the Quraysh had boycotted the Muslims. Now the tables had turned, subhanAllah. Now it was the Muslims who were boycotting the Quraysh, and now they come with humility and hypocrisy. Like a dog with its tail in between its legs, right? Pleading to the Prophet, please have Thumama lift this boycott. And the Prophet ﷺ, mashallah, in his infinite mercy, he asks Thumama to lift the boycott, and Thumama does. That's amazing to me. That's an amazing story. So I have a very quick response, or a very quick, just something very quickly that I'd like for you to do. If the men could scoot up, please. We have a lot of people, I see brothers are struggling in the back to find spaces. So, there are good problems and there are bad problems. Alhamdulillah, this is a good problem. We have so many people coming to the masjid that we need to make more space for them. So this is a good problem to have. Alhamdulillah. So this was the story that I learned about Thumama. Now, there's a lot of lessons we can draw from this. About being kind, about being merciful, being forgiven, about setting a good example to people of other faiths, right? There are all sorts of things that we can learn from this. But here was what really stood out to me. Here's what stood out to me. If we have room for the enemies of Islam in the masjid, Thumama, who had killed many of the companions, if we can accommodate them in the masjid, why is it that we cannot accommodate our sisters and mothers and daughters properly in so many masajid? They are not given adequate space. I'm not saying that's the case with this masjid. I'm just saying generally, this is something that I have observed in my time with ISNA and before ISNA. I've given khutbahs all the way from Florida to New York, to Seattle, to Los Angeles. And every place in between. And this is something that I have observed. We do not give adequate space and accommodation to our sisters, to our Muslimat. So many masajid have become men's clubs. You go and it's just men, usually older men. There are no kids and there are no women. Why? Because the sisters do not feel welcome. They do not feel accommodated. Many masajid nowadays have no space for women. None. I've heard many stories. I was talking to a brother just the other day. He and his wife, who's a convert, went to the masjid to pray Jummah. And somebody stopped them at the door and he said, there's no space for your wife. She has to pray in the parking lot. You can come in, but your wife can't. This is happening across the country. This type of thing is not uncommon. Imagine if you and your wife went to the supermarket and they stopped her and he said, your wife can't come in. We'd be outraged. We'd be outraged if that happened to our wives, our mothers, our daughters, our nieces, our sisters. It's happening in masajid across the country. And many masajid that have a space for the women, it's an afterthought. It's small, it's dingy, it's dirty. It's cut off from the rest of the masjid. Alhamdulillah, I can see the sisters and they're engaged. So it doesn't seem like you have this problem here. Alhamdulillah. But this is a problem in many other masajid. And wallahi, this is something that affects all of us. This affects all of us. This weakens us as an ummah. Right? Our sisters are half of our ummah. So if they don't feel comfortable going to the place where their iman is increased, where they learn about their religion, what's that going to do to our ummah? And they're the half that raises the kids. So if our wives and mothers and sisters don't come, more than likely the kids are not going to come. So now the kids grow up outside of the masjid. And when they grow up, they're probably not going to go to the masjid. They didn't go as youngsters, why should they go as adults? This affects all of us. This is not just a women's issue. This is an everybody issue. Your job as a husband will be harder if your wife and kids do not feel comfortable going to the masjid. I remember when I was in college, it was Ramadan. I went for iftar, and what had just happened, two sisters had come. They were converts. They were both converts. They came to break their fast, and the brother said, I'm sorry, there's no room for you. You have to go break your fast elsewhere. And they were converts, mashallah. I know both of them. They have both since left Islam. And it wasn't because of theology. It's not because they stopped believing in the principles of Islam. It's that we never felt like we were accepted in the community. We go to the masjid, they kick us out. I have dozens of these kinds of stories. A sister that I know, she volunteers at the masjid. She does a lot, mashallah. So when the time for the elections came around, people nominated her to be on the board. Right? Reward her for her efforts. What did the board do? They withdrew her name because she was a female. Obviously the board was all male. This kind of thing is happening a lot. How can we go from accommodating a man who had killed some of the Sahaba in the masjid, right? That was the level of tolerance in the masjid. That was the level of acceptance. How can we go from that to not allowing our sisters to come and break fast? To not allowing them to pray Jum'ah? We have strayed from what the masjid was like during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. But these stories of tolerance during the time of the Prophet ﷺ are numerous. There's a very famous story. We've all heard of it. Hadith. There was a Bedouin who had come to the masjid for the first time. He was a Bedouin, right? He was a simple man. He was in the masjid, and what did he start doing? He started urinating. He started peeing in the masjid. He didn't know any better. He was a Bedouin. You know, when you live out in the desert, I guess you can just relieve yourself anywhere. And the Sahaba saw this, and they started walking towards him. They were mad. They were going to attack him. Luckily, the Prophet ﷺ was there. What did he do? He said, leave him alone. Let him finish. Subhanallah. Let him finish. He said, when he's done, just pour a bucket of water over it, and that will make it clean again. You have been sent to make things easy, not to make them difficult. Do we have that level of tolerance in our masajid now? I'm not saying we should urinate in the masjid, but I'm just saying, right, he was a Bedouin. We know better now. But that was the level of tolerance that they had. There was a ghazwa, there was an expedition going to Tabuk during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. This was a nearby city. And all the men of proper age were required to go. Several of them did not go. They had different reasons. Not legitimate reasons. And afterwards they felt guilty. So you know what they did? They chained themselves up in the masjid. They said, we're not going to leave until we are forgiven. And then Allah sent down a verse in Surah At-Tawbah later, forgiving them for what they had done. But people who obey a direct command from the Prophet, they had a place in the masjid. And yet so many masajid have no space for sisters and no activities. It's not just having a physical space, it's activities and making them feel genuinely welcome. And our kids, when our kids look up to us and say, Mama, Baba, I really want to go to the masjid, right? And there's excitement in their voice. That's when we know we're doing something right. Right? When people are just really, they can't wait to go to the masjid. During the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the masjid was an active, busy place. It was not just a place of prayer. It was not a quiet place. You know, nowadays we think of masjid as a very quiet, solemn, peaceful place. And it should be when we're praying, everybody, nobody talks. But otherwise, there was a lot going on. They would have town hall meetings in the masjid. If there was a problem or there was an issue, they would all gather in the masjid and they would discuss it openly. They would sign treaties. When ambassadors from other tribes or from other countries or nations would come to the Muslims, they would receive them in the masjid. They would sign treaties in the masjid. They would negotiate treaties in the masjid. They would have classes for men and women. They did everything in the masjid. It was a hustling, bustling place. It was not a quiet, solemn place. So how is it that we can have space in our masajid for the chief of a tribe who killed some of the companions? For college boys to break their fast, but not for college girls to break their fast. For people who urinate in the masjid. For people who disobey a command of the Prophet ﷺ, but we don't have space for our mothers, for our wives, and our sisters. This is something we need to ponder because we're losing people. We're losing so many Muslims across the country. They don't want to come to the masjid. My evidence is Eid. How many Muslims do you see at Eid prayer? Oh my goodness, thousands, thousands, thousands. Where are they on a regular basis? And I'm not pointing the finger at them, alhamdulillah, that they come to Eid. May Allah bless them. May Allah bless all of you, inshallah. Right? But why aren't they coming on a regular basis? These are the questions that we should be asking ourselves, especially the leadership. Why aren't more people coming on a regular basis? Ad'u ila Allah yaghfir lakum dhunubakum. Supplicate to Allah to forgive your sins. My dear sisters and brothers, as I mentioned, I'm with ISNA, Islamic Society of North America. When I was interviewing for this position, I told the board at ISNA, the biggest problem we are facing as a community is the lack of inclusion of women in our masajid. Hands down, that is the biggest problem. It's not Donald Trump. It's not Islamophobia. It's not Pamela Geller. It's not any of these people. When Muslims are strong internally, it doesn't matter, who our enemies are. Look at the history of Islam during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. They were always outnumbered. Always outnumbered. Sometimes 10 to 1. But they were still victorious. Don't worry about the enemies. Worry about our internal community. We have to strengthen it. The masjid is where we go to increase our faith and to create a sense of community. This world is a distraction, right? Everything pulls us away. Job, school, work, family life. Everyone's got problems, right? All of it takes us away from Allah. The masjid is the one place where it brings us back to Allah. We need the masjid for our faith. Imagine you take an ice cube and you put it in a cup of water. And you tell the ice cube, don't melt. Stay frozen. And it's in a cup of water. It's a constant struggle. Our faith is the same way. Our faith is constantly under attack. Alhamdulillah, this is a great country. I'm not trying to speak poorly of America. There's no place else in the world that I would rather live, alhamdulillah. But the world in general is very distracting. So how can we prosper when half of our community does not feel welcome in our masajid and the kids are not coming to the masjid? The masjid is for everyone, regardless of gender, regardless of ethnicity, and regardless of how religious you are. If you are barely a Muslim, or if you are a super Muslim, the masjid is for you. It's for the sinner and for the saint, as they say. We need to be accommodating. There's no minimum standard of piety to come to the masjid. Dr. Maher Hathout, who was, Allah yarhamhu, who was a pioneer and a pillar of the Muslim community out in Los Angeles. He was a surgeon. He would give this analogy. He'd say, imagine you're sick and you go to the hospital and somebody at the entrance to the hospital stops you and says, oh, no, 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 no. You cannot come in. You are way too sick to come to the hospital. Go home, get better, and then come back to the hospital. Doesn't make sense, right? The more sick you are, the more you need the hospital. If I wasn't sick, I wouldn't be here in the first place. Our masajid are the same way. When we see someone who we don't think is pious enough or dressed properly, right, we say, get out of here. Come back later. Go put on a hijab or go change your jeans or whatever, right? It's these people that need the masjid the most. And we have to be calm and patient and welcoming, right? If they were super pious, wallahi, those are the people that need the masjid the least, right? So we have to be very careful with the way we treat others. I'm running out of time. But we're becoming very judgmental in our masajid. The atmospheres are becoming very, very judgmental. And people don't want to go because they feel that someone's going to say something to me. My wife went to a masjid one time, and she told me there was this old lady walking around with a ruler. And the sisters whose hijab was not pulled forward, enough, she would smack them on their forehead with a ruler. Right? These kinds of stories are not uncommon. Right? So these are the kinds of atmospheres that some of our masajid have. I was talking with a brother the other day. He went to go pray with his wife. His wife is a Latino convert. There was a women's section in the masjid, and she was praying at the front in the first row of the women's section. And this old auntie went up to her and she said, no, 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 no. You're a convert. You have to pray in the back of the row. This is for the people who were born Muslims. Right? The front row in the women's section. Sisters who were born Muslims. This is what's happening in our masajid. This is what's happening. This is what's happening. And this is, wallahi, this is everybody's problem. It's not just the sister's problem. It's everybody's problem. It will affect you directly or indirectly through your wife or through your kids. This is an everybody problem. And many sisters who are very active and very dedicated are not going to the masjid. I know several sisters who are leaders in their community. Some of them are very famous. You've probably heard of many of them. I won't mention their names. I was talking to one of them one time at one of our conferences. She said, Hazem, I don't really go to the masjid that often. You know, people give me a hard time. This sister is full hijab. She's a scholar, mashallah. She's very knowledgeable. I don't feel comfortable. People, they make comments and why are you here? You should be in your home and blah, blah. It's like, why put up with that? You know? Why put up with that? So this is what's happening, my dear brothers and sisters. And this is everybody's problem. The Fiqh Council of North America, the top scholars in the country, put out a statement last year. We had it at the ISNA 2015 convention. They said that masajid should be welcoming to women and that they should have a space in the main musalla with no barrier. There was no barrier during the time of the Prophet or the Khulafa al-Rashideen. So this idea of having a barrier, this is an innovation. At least part of it should be exposed so they can see the imam. And women should be able to participate in the decision-making process. Give them full access to position on the board and positions of leadership. Allah says in Surah At-Tawbah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتُ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ يأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر ويقيمون الصلاة ويؤتون الزكاة ويطيعون الله ورسوله أولئك سيرحمهم الله إن الله عزيز حكيم. The believing men and the believing women are awliya, supporters of one another. They both enjoin what is good and they both enjoin what is known to be good and forbid what is known to be bad. They establish salah and pay zakat, and they obey Allah and His Messenger. These are the ones on whom Allah will bestow His mercy. Indeed, Allah is exalted in power, wise. So you see, Muslim men and Muslim women are partners in establishing a faithful Muslim community. Both are needed, right? You can have a masjid without the sisters, But that's like standing on one leg. You can only do it for so long before you fall over. A stable community needs two legs. It needs the brothers and the sisters. So my dear sisters and brothers, this is something that we should all be aware of. I'm well over time now. اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات إنك سميع مجيب الدعوات. Almighty God, forgive the Muslim men and women. Forgive the devout men and women, those who are alive and those who have passed. You are indeed the one who listens and accepts all supplications. Servants of Allah, indeed Allah orders us to be just and to excel in what we do. Be generous and take care of our kin and relatives. Never do what is forbidden of all sins and do not transgress. He Almighty advises you so you can remember. One quick note, ISNA is having our conference tomorrow at Masjid Al-Wali in Edison. It is an all-day event. It starts at 10 o'clock. We have sessions. We have Imam Suhaib Webb coming, Sister Dalia Mugahid coming. And then we have a celebration banquet at night, which will go until about 9 or 10. So it's an all-day event. You can buy tickets at the door, or you can register online. It is tomorrow at Masjid Al-Wali, and I encourage all of you to come, inshallah.